Looking directly forwards, we can see a young child, its eyes black, its grin wide, and a stare beaming straight into our souls. This is a piece of art which becomes more disturbing the closer and further you dive into it. This is a piece called Young Faun. It was created in 1902 by the French symbolist artist Odilon Redon. We need to discuss who this artist is, the time period it was created in, and some of the deep meanings in this intricate painting, some of the things which we can initially miss. Let's jump straight in. Now, before we do, we need to discuss one thing. Who is this artist and what is this painting? Well, Redon was associated with a symbolist movement, a movement which focused on dreams, imagination, and the subconscious, and this is going to become very apparent as we look through this painting. So his work often moves away from realism and it instead tries to capture inner emotions and psychological states. He's known for creating images which are mysterious, dreamlike, and slightly unsettling, perhaps like this one to begin with. The painting that we're looking at here shows a young faun. This is a mythological creature that is half human, half goat, and is typically depicted as a creature with horns or pointed ears, and you can obviously see this in the upper part of the artwork. Now, fauns come from classical mythology, often associated with nature, instinct, pleasure, and freedom. And this particular image shows the faun, which is close up, and if we zoom out a bit, you can see the faun fills the majority of the frame. And the background is indeed quite soft, it's very dreamlike, you can kind of tell this, right? We've got soft tones, nothing's particularly abrasive to the eye, and I think this is quite the contradiction, because if you have a look in the foreground, we have the faun, which to some extent I think does look somewhat scary, and then we've got this hazy background in the background. But that brings up the question, what is this trying to portray? Is this a symbol that the actual art or the scene being depicted is something very unreal? Now, whenever we do these art analysis, I like to look at this from a few different angles. And when looking at this painting, I saw a few things. I can take this in a few different ways. Now, one of the things which I saw when looking at this, and again, that context for the video was very important, because a faun, like I say, is a half human, half animal, representing arguably the dual nature of man. Because, this is obviously something that you can recognize as a human, but at the same time, there are some features in this creature, this person, this painting, which are not human. That stare does not look very human. It's quite scary, as is the mouth. Also, you can see the sort of blur around the face. The face is darkened, the body not so much. So again, that's kind of scary. Then you've also got these sort of horns popping out of the head of the creature. So yeah, this could be representing the dual nature of humanity, society, and man. What I mean by that is, if you think about it, in society, we have civilization. And civilization kind of goes against the natural human instincts, which you may find in the wild. When we are civilized, when we live in a civilization, we don't have, generally speaking, we don't have fights, we don't have problems. We live in a state which we consider to be perhaps somewhat superior to other animals and other animal societies. Now, again, instinct, due to us being humans and essentially due to us being animals, can go against societal norms. And you could see this creature as a representation of this. You could also see it as, reason in human mind, and also perhaps desire. Somewhat symbolizing that this creature, this, whatever you want to see it as, is a representation of what we all are behind our social identity. We all have the power to follow our instincts. We all have thoughts which may not necessarily be entirely the norm, right? We have thoughts as what we want to do as individuals. We have beliefs which may not be, well received by everybody. And this could perhaps be a representation of it. This is what, we are. We are essentially animals. We are living in a civilization. And the innocence of the child, contrasted with the horns, contrasted with the background as well, and contrasted with this menacing grin, It does add a new angle to it. Then you could also be looking at this through the angle of also what a faun is. Now, a faun could also be seen as a return to nature. A faun exists in a natural and untouched world. It has no society, it has no rules, and it has no structure. This can be seen as a longing for freedom by the artist in modern life. It could be seen as a rejection of industrialization that was happening around this time and control. And this is the thing, because when we view it like this, maybe the faun is the free spirit. Maybe we, as a society, as individuals, perhaps we're the ones that don't actually recognize the prison that we're in, the prison of society, the prison of judgment, and all of these different things, right? So you can view it through that angle. Now, I also see this potentially as being something that is a symbol of emotional stillness and ambiguity in terms of humanity, and also a state that comes beyond human understanding. Now, I interpret this face somewhat as a menacing grin, but at the same time, whilst it is kind of creepy and scary to look at, it's not as scary as some of the other paintings that we looked at, like the Fool, who had a certainly menacing grin from yesterday's video. And what that leads me to believe is that this, despite being ostensibly scary to the eye, might be quite an ambivalent or, unreadable emotion. The baby is smiling, its eyes are scary but straightforward, yet it still has a scary vibe about it. It looks happy in its face, it really does, but it still looks scary. It still looks menacing, to me at least. And that is, for me, personally, unreadable. I can't entirely read what the emotions on this individual or this creature is or are. So that leads me to ask, is he at peace? Is he angry? Is he, possessed? Or is he just emotionally empty? Because this is very, very challenging to actually read for me in any meaningful way. And this could also suggest a state, therefore, which is beyond human understanding and interpretation. Because we can't read his emotions, or because I can't read his emotions, I'm questioning what they are. Are they something which are intended to portray a message greater than human understanding, greater than human emotional understanding? You could view it through that angle, and that's one of the viewpoints that I've taken on with this piece of art. Now, I also want to bring your attention to the visible appearance of the faun outside of its face, because it clearly is representing a child, right, and or a relatively young creature. Now, what could this symbolize? Why has the artist decided to do this in the impression of a child or someone young? Well, perhaps it is leaning towards, society and pre-civilization as well, because what I mean by this is, this creature is not around anything. It's around things, but it's not around any society. It's by itself, it's young. And whilst this is perhaps something that we can visibly interpret as a young creature, can we interpret this instead as a young state of society, as a young state of the world? A time when humanity and people did not have to go to work in the same ways, and didn't have to, suffer in the same ways. There are obviously different ways, because if you look at what the child's doing, what is it doing? Well, I see it as this. I see it as it is gathering food, because it's eating what appears to be grapes or berries. It is in nature, as depicted by what I see as the grass and the flowers, and it has obviously relatively natural scenes behind it. So it's around trees and greenery and shrubs. It is eating grapes or berries. It is young. And is this just a symbolism of, okay, not the child, but society? Because once upon a time, we could do these things. We were doing these things, and that's all we did. We didn't go to work. We worked in the manner of to try to keep ourselves alive, but not like the modern day. 7, 8, 900 years ago, 2,000 years ago, times were very different, even perhaps before then. Hunter-gatherer tribes, very, very different lifestyles, and it would have revolved, especially in the more pre-civilized context, around this sort of thing, right? Around foraging, Perhaps you would not have had clothes in the same manner, and being in nature, and we don't do that in the same ways anymore. Now, bringing this also back to the face of the demon, the child, whatever you want to see it as, see it in this way, because the child now looks emotionless in this context, right? Because is this another mirror image? An image which is reflecting to us. This individual is trapped, emotionless, or emotionally ambivalent, or emotionally confused. We don't know what's going on in his head, or at least this is how I see it. And the thing about art, and I say this in every single video, it is so open to interpretation, so you might see something completely different, and that's great. I'd love to hear it in the comments. But because we can't read his emotions, or because I can't read his emotions, and because of what he's doing, and because of the way he's not exactly looking at his task, he's looking at us. Is it like, okay, the faun, he's doing what he should be doing, but he's looking at us directly with his gaze forwards, as you can obviously see. He's looking at us, questioning what we're doing. Why are we living the way that we're living? Is he judging us? Are we the ones in the wrong? Now, you could also see this in so many different ways, because, you know, viewing it through that angle, if that is the case, if he's looking at us and judging us, maybe maybe he's a representation of our suppressed wants and desires. Because think about the way that the world is structured, and this painting's really from something like 120 years ago. It's not that old compared to some of the ones that we look at. This comes from a time around about or post-industrial revolution, or when these things were at least beginning to take place. And view it through this context, right? We might want to be playing, or living a more natural life, or a life that's more innocent, or a life that follows our true desires to eat, to be safe, to be enlightened. You know, we've got a nice background behind us. But we stare forwards, or he stares forwards at us like, what are you doing? Right? This is not how you're supposed to carry on. And he's so curious or questioning of us that he can't take his eyes off us, despite the task he is indeed doing. So maybe I'm wrong in that one, but that's one of the things. So, like I say, because he looks so directly at us, we need to question whether we're any different to him deep down. And this is a different angle to it, because what I'm saying here is not necessarily that he's judging us, but we look at him and we can see where we all began. He's a child. He's a baby. He's playing, right? He's picking with grapes or something. He's innocent. And this is where we all start. And again, he's looking at us like, well, where are we? You know, what are we doing? Maybe we're the ones in the wrong. Maybe we're the ones that need to question ourselves. So, another thing to see, or at least another thing I see behind this, is when we look at the image, it's clearly very soft. And I mean, in that sense, it's very dreamlike. The scene is relatively soft. It's a little bit more sort of cartoonish in a way. And what I mean by this is, it makes it feel like this is not real. You know, it's like a dream. It's like a thought. It's like something in the mind, a state of mind. It's kind of showing us that the boundary between dreams and reality can at times be very thin. Because this image, just like much art, is open to interpretation. None of the things that I've spoken about in this video, minus the facts of what the image depicts, are necessarily true. But from my mind and from your minds in the comments, we're going to think about this and we're going to be like making our own thoughts. So whilst this is a dream, or it could be seen as a dream, we can still understand it. And it shows us that there is a thin line between what's real and what we desire and what we think. And especially viewing this through the angle or with a deeper lens on it of, okay, this is a depiction of society, it becomes even more interesting, because then we're thinking, okay, so are our dreams that detached, or why are our dreams that detached from what we're doing when we could have all those things? Because the state between dream and reality is thin. You know, it's easy to bridge. So that's one of the things I see when I look at this painting. Another thing that I notice here is as well, he is alone. He's free. He can play. He's playing about, right? He's playing with grapes. He's in this lovely scene, but he's by himself. He's not with anyone. So the fact he's alone raises a question. And that question I see is the freedom that this creature has gained worth the societal rejection? Because he can, and this is something you've got to think of in real life, or at least something that I think of in real life. Because he can play all day. He's free. He can mess about with these grapes. He can walk about, live, whatever he wants to do. But he is not with anyone. No one's going to understand it. And this is like, in the world, in a lot of instances, when you try to do something that you want to do, and everybody knows this, you get some pushback. You tell your friends what you want to do, you tell your family that you want to change careers, and you always get some pushback from people, no matter what it is. Because as a society, and as societies as a whole, well, society is built on collective morals, isn't it? And collective norms. And collective norms don't always account for individual norms. So that kind of speaks to potentially an angle where he's shunned from society. Because what he's saying is what he believes in, he's doing what he thinks is right, but nobody else can understand it, and it's confusing to society. So society gives him structure, but nature has given him his freedom. And in our modern world, and again this I would consider to be from the modern world just 100 years ago, you can't really have both. You can't. You're either in society or you're in nature, right? You kind of have to pick which one you want to do. Then you've also got a level of sort of hidden darkness beneath the beauty, because the image on the surface is obviously very soft, very dreamlike. But at the same time, think about what the image depicts. Well, it's strange. It is slightly unsettling with the image of the child. It is hard to read and it's unknown. You can't actually tell what's going on entirely. It's hard to read and it is difficult. So this kind of brings in an angle where, like, the beauty can hide something disturbing. Because whilst we don't necessarily know what's going on with the face of the demon, or I should say the faun, we don't know. Which is both the beauty and the disturbing part, because we can see it as he's happy, he's free. What if it's depicting something else? Because he also doesn't look entirely happy to be there. So we also need to analyse this through the angle of what the faun is doing and what he is. So the faun as a creature, it doesn't question, it doesn't analyse or worry, it simply just exists. And this contrasts with modern humanity and society. We have overthinking, we have anxiety, and we're constantly stimulated by everything around us. There's always something to do, there's always a goal to beat. So maybe the awareness that he has or presents is actually a burden and not a gift. So that's just some of the takeaways that I took from this image. It's one that looks on the surface to be quite confusing. It is obviously, or at least in my viewpoint, it's quite a dreamlike state. It's hard to fully interpret what's going on here. But I do think it is an image with a lot of depth to it. I think it's a piece of art with a lot of skill behind it. The style is very interesting. The image depicts something which I think we can all learn from. So that's just what I've seen. Maybe you will agree, maybe not. Of course, do let me know in the comments. I always love to read your comments and hear your thoughts. But yeah, a very interesting piece of art, a very interesting work with many a hidden message in it. Or at least that is how I see it. So if you have a different viewpoint, let me know in the comments. Thank you so much and goodbye for now.